Hello, and welcome to Waypoint, the AirMed&Rescue podcast, your place to hear all about the latest news and insights from professionals in the airborne special missions sector. My guest today is Trevor Mulder, Engineering Program Manager at PAL Aerospace. Trevor has a long career in engineering, design, and certification compliance in aviation. So welcome, Trevor, to the AirMed&Rescue podcast, Waypoint. I wanted to get straight in there and ask you about your background. So you studied aerospace engineering at university. What made you choose that career path over any other forms of engineering or anything else, really?
Yeah, I guess aerospace. I'm a military brat by birth.
Yeah.
Dad was in the Air Force, so I was an airplane guy going all the way back. So I was originally a sort of a pilot wannabe as a kid and went out and did some flying at one point, but kind of migrated back to getting a little more formal education. Probably around that time I was trying that was early 90s, and it was one of the slumps in the industry where pilots were being laid off. So I figured I'd better get myself back to school, and always been sort of mechanically inclined. So engineering was a good fit, and airplanes and engineering, I landed me in aerospace. So kind of lucky that way that got to work in a field that's sort of also a passion, but sort of lucky that way.
So you say your dad was in the Air Force, was it?
Yeah. He started out as a pilot and then finished off his career sort of in almost similar aspects. Well, obviously jump around a lot in the military, but
Cool.
He worked in maintenance training for a while and procurement later on, and so NATO deployments.
So you were always around aviation growing up. Did you get to go on any aircraft with your dad, or did you get to see how they were made or maintained? Was there any sort of involvement there?
Yeah, if I could go back, I wish I would have listened to him more and would have got involved with the air cadets and stuff as a younger guy. But being a headstrong teenager, I never went that path. But yeah, there was lots of opportunities going to the base. You know, used to run a hangar in Base Borden here and in Ontario, and go in there and walk through the hangars on a Saturday and be empty, and you get to sit in the cockpit and play around in the airplanes when you're young, and then. Yeah. Older years, just always sort of on the periphery of Air Force bases, just because he was an Air Force guy. So,
after you graduated with your degree in engineering, you went into the industry basically, and you've been with PAL Aerospace for over a decade now. Can you tell me a bit about your role as engineering manager, its responsibilities, how it fits in with the wider company?
Yeah, just over 10 years. Not sure if you're familiar with the engineering division of PAL. So prior to PAL Engineering, we were DECA Aviation Engineering. It was a Canadian DAO. So I've been with them for 25 plus years. So pretty much right out of school. Started with DECA, and then PAL bought us in 2014. That's sort of some of the history there. So we're sort of the engineering and DAO arm of PAL Aerospace now. As far as the role, so a DAO, it's a design approval organization. We're delegated by Transport Canada. So over time, I moved into delegation. So the engineering manager role is one piece, but delegation as Transport Canada delegate, you get more involved in the approval side of certain technical aspects. So my delegation is structures and mechanical systems and occupant safety. So I get involved into that side of it. And then the manager aspects sort of go along with reviewing drawings and approval and aspects of project management in the areas of my delegation and discipline. So, and
what does that involve, like on a day-to-day basis? What are you looking at? What are you working on? Who are the people you interact with, both internally and externally?
I guess in my role at PAL, it's been sort of the big mission system projects primarily that I've been on. So I don't interact externally a whole lot with other third-party companies like we used to back when we did smaller customer jobs. We still do those, but my role, I'm on the internal PAL mission system job. So a lot of my interaction is with designers and report writers here, other engineers, sort of developing the modifications and developing the substantiation data. And then the other big piece on my plate is sort of doing aspects of sort of the lead of certification, so interacting with Transport Canada. And in other cases now, it's International Airworthiness Authority, so obviously EASA. We haven't dealt just in the areas field is playing right now, not so much with the FAA recently, but we used to do a lot more than that. But EASA and the CAA and the Dutch authorities are our main players right now on the jobs we have in-house.
Because you've got a lot of involvement with the Dutch Coast Guard, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So the Dutch Coast Guard, we deal directly typically with ILNT, the Dutch Airworthiness Authority, but then the nature of how EASA evolved and some of the approvals we have, the Dutch are part of EASA now, so we either deal with them directly or we deal through EASA on some of the approvals.
And so in your career, you must have worked on lots of projects. So do you have a favorite one that you've overseen or been involved with?
Yeah, it's tough. Variety keeps you motivated. So we used to do a lot more smaller projects, so survey type things, helicopter news gathering or law enforcement helicopters. So putting camera mounts on helicopters.
Oh yeah.
Survey work. I guess I tend to enjoy the ones where you get a little bit of everything, including some flight test aspect, because it gets you out of the office into the airplane. So the PAL mission stuff is great for that. It's just on a bigger platform. But the good thing about DECA formerly and now PAL is the variety that you get to see.
And so talking of variety, PAL does a diverse range of sectors that it serves, such as maritime surveillance and patrol, offshore wildlife monitoring, air ambulances and airborne search and rescue. How do you approach each of these different areas, which all come with their own specific requirements? How do you approach it from an engineering perspective? What do you need to know in order to get the product that's needed right for the mission?
Yeah, I don't think there's any real recipe for it. Like any other program, I'm again talking about past external customers. You get it. Some customers would show up and PAL's no different. Everything would be, 95%. Here's our design concept. This is what we want it to look like. And we just need you for the certification aspects. And then we would sort of massage a design into, meeting the CARS or FAR regulations. So other customers might show up and it's like, we need to do this. I need you to do the design right from scratch. So at the end of the day, you have your FAR requirements or your CAR requirements. And it's basically a building code and in separate divisions. There's structures, flight, power plants, avionics and electrical systems, mechanical systems. And, the best approach I found over time is even if it's a big full mission aircraft, you just chop it into smaller jobs and determine compliance in all the areas that are affected for that type of project. The really nice part about being part of PAL now is that we're all under one company. So engineering, we have more direct access to the maintenance folks who have to actually just build it. So, if things are working right, you get that collaboration with the guys on the floor. And it's always been an interesting dynamic, I think, in any field. Engineering versus the floor and, guys getting drawings. Oh, why does this guy have 3 decimal places on his drawing? It's like, my AutoCAD settings were just defaulted to that. Like, do you understand what that takes to build that? If I have to machine to 3 decimal places, but with everything under one roof, you'd have that immediate access to people. And same thing with the ops folks, the pilots and people developing SOPs. And that's the nicer part of being part of a bigger company is that collaboration that you get.
And with the work that you do you find that it's much more of a, how do I say it? Is it encouraging to see everybody working together for a common goal? Do you get to feel that sort of family kind of emotion when a project comes to completion? Like everybody piling together made this work. Do you feel, does that help motivate you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a loaded question. I don't want to make it all sunshine and rainbows. It's aviation. It's high pressure schedule wise. So when things are coming down to the crunch, it's definitely a struggle. But when you get to the end of a project, it's really a good feeling to see it all come together. But it's good on our side on the the engineering and the certification side too. I think to have that collaboration and the guys in maintenance understand, you get to express your side of the equation on the certification and the regulatory side. And it's like, hey, it's a good design, but we need to add this and this and this, and here's why. And then, you get that understanding built up over time. But yeah, no, it's aviation, and crunch time, it can get pretty tense schedule wise at times, but we always made it through.
So talking specifically about the recent certification for the Dash 8 maritime surveillance aircraft fleet with the search and rescue drops, can you tell me a little bit first about the Dash 8, and then can you explain to me what the search and rescue drops are and how the aircraft needs to be modified and prepared to do that, and what it needs to go through to get certified for these changes that you've done to make it appropriate for the work that it needs to do?
Yeah, the Dash 8, I guess, to start. I guess these days it's worthwhile saying good Canadian product.
Yeah.
PAL Airlines flies the Dash 8, and so it's a good fit that way for the company in terms of part sourcing and maintenance training and things. That they've got a huge fleet. They've got a fleet of Dash 8s within the airline, and that's sort of what they've been using for between King Airs and Dash 8s. That's their choice of maritime patrol. So it's a really good fit for us that way. It's a good airplane, I think, for the role it's in, especially, if you think of maritime patrol and on the East Coast specifically, if you have to be low level for visual work.
Yeah.
You see a lot of globals and things like this getting modified for surveillance activity, but to me, it's higher speed, higher altitude type work. If you need to get down low under clouds or down into the soup, the Dash 8's good for that. Yeah. Good short takeoff landing, slow speed characteristics, and good size for the mission patrol. High wing, so good visibility out the windows. Don't know what more to say there.
So can you tell me about the modification that was needed for these drops that comes? Out of the empennage, is it? You have to modify what you explain. You explain what these search and rescue drops are and how the aircraft is modified for it.
Yeah, so the search part, PAL's been operating Dash 8s. I think we mentioned the Dutch Caribbean activity, so I think those are the first two Dash 8s down there. But we have an all EOIR turret on the nose. Lately, it's been pretty steady with L3. The MX-15 camera turret is the big visual tool. We have a VIDAR pod, which is sort of another visual search and detection pod on the belly of the aircraft, and then a maritime radar sort of under the wing on the lower fuselage. So those are the big search tools. In the NLCG aircraft, we had a IR/UV scanner on the back of the airplane for pollution detection, and then all the downlink and comms and stuff that go along with communicating with all the maritime vessels. And I'm a structures guy, so I can't speak too much on the avionics and the mission stuff. On the inside, then obviously workstations where they run everything from. We have typically two big touch screens, FLIR hand controller in the cabin mission systems on our force multiplier aircraft. We had 4 workstations in there, and it was sort of set up as a training aircraft as well, depending on the contract it was on. So yeah, obviously everything that goes along with, sort of like I said, like to chop things up into different areas and different mods. But when you do it that way, the building code basically applies to everything. The interesting ones are where you end up cutting bigger holes in the fuselage. There's a lot more loads impact. So the radar typically and the drop stores hatch is the big one for us. The drop hatch, it's a fairly large hole. I think we have an 18-inch hole in the bottom of the fuselage with a tube up to the floor level, and then they basically relocate the pressure vessel. It's an open hole in the bottom of the airplane, so the tube becomes the pressure vessel up to the floor. So in that, to use that system, it's obviously depressurize the airplane, and then you go up to the floor, and you've got an 18-inch hole that you can drop objects out of, and then all the racking and storage for items that you're going to drop, obviously within the interior. So all the cabin layout assessments that goes with everything like that. What else can I tell you about drop stores?
If you've cut a big hole in the aircraft, how do you test that? And how do you and if you're the first people to do that kind of modification, how does that get certified? What's the process for getting that approved?
For the flight test aspects, that was probably the more standard part. We did that originally when we first certified all the modifications. Mm-hmm. So we did sort of some functional flight testing. There's a fairing in front of that hole. We actually, the first flight test we went out, we found that we had a bit of a vortex coming off of the fairing into the hole. So we came back and put on a few vortex generators just at the leading edge of the hole and solved the problem. You go out and fly it. Obviously, you build up process in your flight test program, making sure you're careful as you proceed through it. But all the usual for the hole itself, we tested in combination with all the other things went on it. So obviously, we hire a flight test pilot. They develop a test plan, get it approved by Transport Canada, and make sure we're hitting all of the requirements. So all the stability issues, high speed performance issues, low speed performance issues, and then into that program, we opened up the hatch and exercised. There's a drop hatch bar that secures if you're dropping a raft. You would put that in there. You would load it. And then so we did a function check of that and made sure there was no buffeting issues associated with anything like that. And that was sort of the aircraft level checkout that the system was safe to fly and functioned. And then the interesting part that took a lot longer was the regulatory side of actually dropping stuff. We mentioned the word collaboration earlier, but that's where it got really interesting with, typically in Canada, the military is the provider of search and rescue services. So particularly the rescue part and dropping things. So PAL's we've had the ability to do the search part with the equipment on the airplane, and we do that regularly. But when it comes to dropping things out of the airplane, there's no civil regulations associated with that. And because search and rescue is typically military in Canada, it was considered outside of Transport Canada's mandate for civil aviation. So it's sort of a paramilitary role is how they looked at it. So the collab did, at the end of the day, it worked out really well. There was really, really good collaboration between us and Transport Canada. Transport Canada consulted with D&D as the experts on dropping things. We, in turn, Transport Canada, we dealt a lot more with the ops folks than we would on a typical project. Right. And dangerous goods came into it for carrying things like, initially we had planned on carrying smoke markers and paraflares. So there's a whole lot of dangerous goods aspects. So ran into some roadblocks with that to a certain degree. So we reverted just to dropping rafts and marker buoys for now. But we're going to come back to that. But just the different divisions that came into play than they would on a standard project, just for modifying an aircraft for civil things. So we developed a standard from military standards. We developed a special condition that says, here's all the things you need to do to consider dropping things out for a civil certification project. So that special condition based on this military standard is how we ended up certifying the operational aspects of dropping things out of the aircraft. So the physical modification was almost the easy part, and then getting through all those hurdles to get it operational. And it was interesting too. I mean, I might be nerding out here a little bit on some engineering stuff or certification stuff, but you design systems on aircraft, you look for redundancy and fail-safe things. And something like this, just the nature of it, you rely on the human factor. So that just automatically overlapped into the operational side more than it would in the past. So the flight manual supplement had to be harmonized with the standard operating procedures, which PAL had. So there was a little bit good back and forth between the operators, more than you would do on a typical program.
So you've mentioned that you had a little bit of roadblock with the flares and stuff. So that's something you're still looking at, something you're developing. And is there anything else that you're developing in that sort of direction to enhance and improve the modification and the certification of the drops?
Yeah, to get smokes back in, there's some dangerous goods things that we can do on our own on the certification side. It might involve restricted category certification, but at the same time, just with everything the mission system can do now on itself, we're looking at other means to fill the role that you would. I think most operators, there's obvious benefits to putting a smoke canister in the water and helps you judge wind and driftage and things like that. But looking at ways that we can do that, alternate items we could throw out that aren't dangerous goods would be one way to do it. If you at nighttime, if you could put an illuminated beacon into the water that you could track, and using the mission system and the FMS to track your target and figure out your offset points that way as well. So there's lots of options. Kind of too busy to examine some of them at times with just the regular work, but there's lots going on that front too.
So you mentioned that you're a Canadian company, you're working at Transport Canada, you've also worked with some the Dutch Coast Guard. Who else is interested in this technology, and who's it applicable to? is it just Coast Guards you're looking at, or are there other applications for it?
Yeah, PAL has all kinds of bid opportunities for the maritime patrol aspects of it. There probably are other ISR or search activities over land outside of the maritime aspect of it. I'm probably not the best person to speak to all those opportunities because I work in the engineering arm here, but I see a lot of the bid activity going on. But yeah, we have PAL actually owns and operates one aircraft, and we're just putting a second aircraft into that program. It's the Force Multiplier program. So that's sort of a power by the hour model where people can buy services from that aircraft on their own. So it's been busy for the last few years too. So I think the way the world is going, intelligence is everything, and the more you can do to gather that intelligence, the better you'll be. The rescue aspect is great. Joint support venture here in our current model in Canada with the DFO aircraft supporting the military and the search and rescue efforts. But yeah, there's lots of opportunity, particularly in intelligence.
And is there anything that you're working on at the moment that you can tell us about that will help with the special missions community? Are there any projects that you're sort of close to finalizing or in the process of getting certified?
On the certification side, internally, we're always doing new SATCOM and avionics upgrades. PAL, for people that don't know much about PAL is sort of a group of companies. Actually, in CartNav is one of those, and they develop mission software. So there's a lot going on, they're constantly under development. I know there's a lot of activity with ground link stuff and just making sure data is streaming live to stakeholders. But again, I'm a structures guy, so I can't speak too much to that.
So is there anything any parts of your job, your role with a company that we haven't talked about that you find interesting that you think our listeners would also enjoy hearing about?
It's a tough question. When you're deep into it, the regulatory stuff can be pretty dry and uninteresting. Okay. But yeah, I think anyone in aviation having a good understanding of why things are the way they are, but it can get pretty dry and a lot of red tape on the regulatory side, and things take a lot longer than people might expect on some of it.
For a standard project, how long might the back and forth take after you've done all the sort of designs and you're submitting it for the first time to get it certified? How long does that take sometimes? Yeah,
I think probably any regulator these days, they're pushing delegates to use the delegation community. So we're pretty lucky here at PAL. The DAO has, I think we're up to 11 or 12 delegates internally with a good mix of things. And then on top of that, we have a good network of playtest guys. So I don't know that there's a standard answer. We try to look to delegate and offload as much as we can off of TC, which is what delegation is intended to do. But there's also certain things that they don't delegate, and there's certain amount of oversight that they have to have. So, it can range. On a small one-off type job, you could turn something or a small around in weeks. Something like a minor structural repair can sometimes be done in days to get the airplane out flying again. These bigger missionized aircraft, we're typically a year and a half, but we follow the schedule of what it takes to build the airplane and get the testing done. There's always, whatever the build process is, there's always a tail end testing at the end once the airplane is built and back into flying for us to do the certification aspects that require the airplane to be fully functional for.
Right. I think we can close it off there. Thank you very much, Trevor, for talking to me. It's been a pleasure. It's been really interesting, actually. There's a lot of stuff that I wasn't aware about, and really interested to find out about your work. And that's all for this episode of Waypoint. All that's left for me is to thank Trevor Mulder again for joining me. If you want to know more about PAL Aerospace and the services they provide, visit palaerospace.com. Take care, be safe, and I'll see you all again soon.